Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I propose to start this session. I think we all agree that the deep renovation of the existing building stock is one of the key challenges for Europe. And that's, I think, the objective of this session. As you see, it's entitled Bringing Solutions Together, Voluntary Certification Schemes and Other Approaches in Support of Deep Renovation of Buildings. This session is organized by ACE, the Architectural Council of Europe, together with 5 EU-funded EU projects. And we are very pleased to have for each of these projects a person in the panel. So there is Olivier Gresloup from CSTB representing ALDREN, Dragomir Tsanev from NFEC representing Fit to NZEB, Luca Laghi from Certimac representing HEPEN, Alexander Delianis from Sempraxis team representing iBROAD, and last but not least Simona Doka from Huigen representing TripleA Reno. We will try to give, an overview of a number of challenges, results, solutions. And so here in this table you see, it's probably not readable, but we will go into detail afterwards, that we have a number of challenges. That's the top part. And you see most of the project, each of the columns is one of the 5 projects. You see most of them are dealing with these challenges. The same for what we call solutions, and also for insights, results. And so the idea is that for each of these identified challenges, solutions, and insights, one of the representatives will present, the ideas, but they are not only for that specific project, they are, overall relevant and linked to the different projects. So I propose to start with the first part, challenges, where we see that we have 5 challenges which we like to present: the market fragmentation, the difficulties mobilizing private finance, the lack of reliable information, the lack of professional skills, and the rigidity of the regulatory framework. And so each time one of the, 5 panel members will give some insights in this specific challenge. So I propose to start with the first challenge which was identified, that is market fragmentation, and that will be commented by Alexander Delianis.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So I would like to invite you to think a little bit of the building market, not in terms of what we know about buildings, what we are used to do, but just consider a little bit how it would be if a building was a car, if a building was a computer, or a building was a suit. Things would be very, very different. In all these cases, one expects that simply hiring one technician can solve all the problems for that specific artifact, for that specific thing. In the case of the building sector, things are much more complex. That's what we mean in terms of fragmentation. The sector itself is fragmented. So when we are talking about a building, imagine going to a technician for your car just to fix the air conditioning, and for another technician to fix part of the engine, and to another technician just for the glasses. Well, in reality, each building owner is a project manager that has to coordinate all these technicians together. This is what we mean by fragmentation of the building sector. This is what we mean when we are talking of renovation processes. The fragmentation that is there, we can move to the next slide, which has a few more details. We have different installers, construction companies, financing institutes. So how to get your financing for a car? Most probably when you're buying a car, the financing is integrated in the way you're buying it. The market itself means that there are too many roles taken up by too many players who try to do more than is their specific role in an effort to provide solutions. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to have integrated planning for the owners. The planning processes are very complex. Financing schemes are themselves fragmented. There are different schemes, different incentives. The state might try to do something, the banks might try to do something different. In some cases, even some of the companies involved in construction might do something. The fragmentation of knowledge and regulations means that there is a lack of management capacity of somebody to handle everything, both at the level of skills, but also at other aspects of the process. And finally, and perhaps most importantly in the era of innovation that we are living, the fragmentation of innovation in construction sector due to all of the above. What we see as disruption in other sectors is much more difficult in the building sector. Just imagine that a car built 25 years ago cannot legally now move in many of the major cities of Europe. This is, of course, not the case for buildings.
Thank you, Alexander. You referred already to finance, and that I think is, let's say, a second identified challenge, that is difficulties in mobilizing private finance. And Olivier, I think you could give some more insight on this specific issue.
Yes, thank you. The ALDREN project addresses a lot of different actors, from public to private actors, but here I will do a focus on the people who make the decision to do deep renovation, and to the people who finance this renovation. So the context is, you know this context, there are insufficient levels to finance energy efficiency in Europe. If we look at the energy efficiency targets of the Europe for 2020, we have half than the money that is needed that has been invested today. And only a small share of all renovation projects include parts concerning energy renovation. So in this context, the challenge is that energy represents only a small part of the cost to run a building, only a few percent, as you can see on the graph on the right. So the other costs are not related directly to energy, only indirectly. So the main point is that if you, for instance, if you have a 10 or 20% variation in the cost, you can see that if you have a 20% reduction in energy cost, it will only affect it will not affect at all the energy benefits, the financial benefits for the owner of the building. So how to tackle that is that we have to take into consideration the differences between the approach of an energy engineer, who is going to define the energy renovation solutions, and the financial analyst, especially in real estate companies, that is going to define a financial strategy for his building stock. If you can. So the key point is to address these financial actors with their own language and to target all the benefits related to renovation and energy renovation. If you look at the graph on the left, so it's very tiny, but you see that we have different actors, and we have focused in ALDREN on owners of buildings. And here with the red square, you can see a lot of different financial benefits that are only indirectly related to energy, and only the green square is related to energy. So how do we address these indirect benefits, such as higher attractiveness of the building, higher rents, risk mitigation in the long term? Well, we need to provide them holistic, reliable, consistent information about everything that is related to energy, and I will present that in the next slides after a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Olivier already mentioned to reliable information, and that's, I think, the next challenge, so lack of professional skills. And I think, Simona, you will say something more about that.
Yes, indeed. The idea of TripleA Reno 1 year ago started from this core problem, which was the lack of reliable information for end users. Indeed, here I listed some of the key elements. The fact that the European renovation market was still top-down and supply-driven. So in the idea that we really needed to fill this gap between the market, what the market was providing, what the users were requesting, and indeed a mismatch between the offer renovation product and packages and what the actual users were able to buy, or the type of technology that they were able to understand that was needed in their homes. Indeed, one of the elements of our challenges of TripleA Reno was the lack of attractive tools for a wide array of stakeholders involved in the renovation process. So here is one of the key A of TripleA, which is attractive. So attractiveness is overcome in TripleA Reno through gamified features of the platform that we are developing. And here, attractiveness is not just make information easier to understand, but also providing the right tools to the right people, and also targeting messages to different stakeholder groups. So here we connect to the second A of TripleA, which is affordable also. So the idea of providing information, but also tools to opt in for the most affordable solution, but also maybe sometimes to what is considered cost optimal for the investment. So this is another challenge that we face in TripleA, and indeed the most important features that are included in a TripleA Reno platform are supporting the end users, which can be individual homeowner or, for instance, a social housing company, to select the indeed the most affordable solution for them. And then we talk about attractiveness, affordability, but also acceptability. It's also very important. So lack of reliable information, it means that if the information is not attractive for the user, then there is a likely little chance that the solution is not going to be opt-in or selected. So here also the fact that after the renovation, when the renovation is in place, there was a lack of solid quality control of the renovation process. So we understood that there is this mismatch between what users or individual homes owners would like to have and the final result, how this can be certified. Because a lot of different professionals are involved in the process, and sometimes, especially when they deal with high innovative solutions or technologies, there is a little chance that the quality can be ensured at the end. And then finally, of course, the lack of data on real building energy performance after the renovation. So the fact that all these innovative solutions are promising to provide a good quality after the installation, but there is still little chance to monitor and keep track of the performance. So here also TripleA is trying to overcome this challenge.
Okay, thank you, Simona. So we heard that lack of reliable information is a challenge. We heard before that lack of finance is a challenge. Assume I have the knowledge, I have the finance, I still have to find people who do it. And then we come, I think, by the next, I would say, challenge is the lack of professional skills. And I think, Dragomir, you want to say something about that aspect there.
Yes, thank you, Peter. And indeed, thank you for all the previously speaking, our colleagues, for bringing on the topic, actually, the reason on why we are still discussing the challenge of lack of professional skills. It has been recognized all around Europe. We do need better qualified workers and designers, and numbers of them, to deliver quality nearly zero energy buildings, zero energy buildings, plus energy buildings, because obviously, having set the political target for decarbonization of the building stock, we expect that each and every renovation happening out there right now delivers a zero energy building standards. That's, doesn't need much explanation. But why doesn't that happen on the ground? The build-up skills initiative by the European Commission initiated a broad survey, identifying the need of millions of workers around Europe to be upskilled with skills sufficient to deliver quality building around, and identified a lack of accessibility and quality of educational program. We did the same with Fit to NZEB, and that's true. We don't have enough supply of quality educational service. But the issue is not there. Yes, we can cover that, but it is much harder to cover the market demand for quality NZEB. And this is why we need argumentation like that we receive from ALDREN about the financing models, and argumentation like we receive from TripleA Reno for the supply of information needed to be delivered to the end user to stimulate the market. This is how we would increase the demand for training and the number of skilled workers. And one last sentence from my side, as an outcome from our projects, or let's say as an inspiration from our projects, in Ireland there is a new scheme financed by the government for training for 50,000 construction workers for a period of 2 years. So this is what a political engagement is, and this is how we want to tackle the problem if we want to be successful in delivering the political objectives.
Okay, thank you. As you know, the building sector is confronted with a lot of regulations, which I think we need in order to have, let's say, a society which functions. But of course, sometimes, or perhaps frequently, this regulatory framework can also be a barrier. So the rigidity can be a barrier. And I think, Lucas, you want to say something about that aspect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. For what concerns the rigidity of the regulatory framework, faced to this rigidity, taking into consideration three main aspects. First of all, technical aspects. As a second layer, technical and financial aspects related as well to the rigidity, and last but not least, also some mismatches about local markets. More in details, when we talk about technical rigidity, the meaning is related to the fact that the calculation methods are mainly based on steady state calculation, typical of winter climate and of season with the severe climate. And this approach doesn't fit very well with Mediterranean areas. That is the topic and the challenge of HAPPEN project. And when you think about technical and financial rigidity, the meaning is that the approach generally implemented is related to all-in-one approach, in which we have to consider the building as it is, and after retrofit intervention we have a deep retrofitting or NZEB retrofitting, without considering an alternative approach more suitable when you have low incomes or when you have limited financial capacity that is typical of the Mediterranean areas. And in this case, the alternative approach, the complementary approach that we are proposing, that we are implementing, is a step-by-step approach in order to foster the market uptake into Mediterranean areas. And last but not least, it's also important to consider that there is a fragmentation into the market according to the multi-property. That is a very relevant issue to be managed, and also for what concerns this aspect, is necessary to implement regulatory instrument about it. Please go ahead. And for this reason, into HAPPEN project, all the Mediterranean area is well represented, starting from Italy, France, Spain, Croatia, Slovenia, Greece, and Cyprus. Please. And the approach that we are proposing is named NZEB approach. This new name has the aim to bring the flexibility into the market and into a framework in which the regulatory themselves are very rigid. And in this synthetic scheme, you can see the different variables that we are managing, that we are taking into consideration to foster this takeoff. We are developing a tailored methodology for Mediterranean areas, transparent, taking into consideration the development of a platform that is a sort of matchmaking platform and marketplace, a NZEB protocol, and through an holistic approach, taking into consideration engagement and training, financing and regulation, and optimal solution, and adaptive tools, able to adapt the results and the approach to persons, relation, concerning the engagement of the people and end user, resources, considering a step-by-step approach, as I mentioned before, to the situation, according to different alternatives in terms of investment, environment, taking into consideration an holistic approach, LCA approach, and so on, and the context, in order to evaluate calculations specifically addressed to a climate, to a reference building. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Is anybody in the room who would like to react or make a comment or raise a question to the panel members? Everything is very clear. You don't see other challenges than the 5 listed here? Or let's say key challenges, because I think there are indeed more, but overall you seem to agree. Okay, so we know there are quite a number of challenges. challenge is good, but of course we should try to find solutions. And so the 5 projects have identified 5, I would say, key areas of solutions, including holistic approach to deep renovation, voluntary certification, focus on specific building typologies, building renovation passports, and integrated platforms. And so the first aspect which we'd like to go in more detail is holistic approach to deep renovation, and that will be presented by Dragomir.
Yes, definitely. There are a lot of failures actually in building renovation that are related in our experience with the lack of holistic approach, with the lack of understanding of the interdependence between the different factors that come into the renovation process and into the usage and maintenance of the buildings after the renovation works. So there's a core of technical issues that has to be much better understood and explained by the professional community. And the interplay between them is one of the major reasons to avoid underperformance and dissatisfaction of the end users, which is absolutely crucial for forming the market. But also there are other issues, and I would like to stress on a couple of them. So first of them is the process management. Process management, it is all important. Now, don't want to explain, but I will just mention a couple of keywords. First of all, think about the BIM workshops that we will have here later on the room, and how we can integrate BIM tools in order to support the process management. Endless opportunities in there. Then think about step-by-step renovation, which is happening one way or another around Europe, but it's happening in unsystematic way. And management of the step-by-step renovation process, where we work together with Alexander, within iBROAD, is another key issue that we want to tackle. Then we have a lot of, I call them, cultural issues. So we have, first of all, to respect the cultural and historical value of buildings to our society and to our individuality. Because actually our attitude towards buildings will define our investment decisions, and how we understand buildings in our cultural value norms will define the value we also give to energy efficient building renovation, to maintaining the quality of buildings. And then we also want to think about communication and engagement of stakeholders and promoting not only individual values but also social values. And this is also related to environmental and sustainable issues that we want to tackle. These are the things that has come into play, have to come into the educational and training schedules of the institutions that provide vocational training and educational services, if we want to have a really holistic perspective towards building renovation and achieve the ambitious targets that we have set ourselves.
Thank you, Dragomir. When we discussed the challenges, you heard that the lack of reliable information is an issue of concern, quality aspects, trust in the system. And so one of the solutions there can be voluntary certification. And I think, Olivier, you have there some ideas put together.
Yes, thank you. The voluntary certification scheme is at the heart of the ALDREN project. So in fact, it is based on policy support to the PBD, because this concept was introduced in the PBD Article 11. The idea was to propose a kind of energy performance certificate, but at the scale of Europe, so that it should be possible to compare the performance of buildings from a country to another one, whereas currently we have a lot of different EPCs with a lot of different qualities. So what we have developed, and we are currently developed in the ALDREN project, is our version of the EVC, which is an holistic version. I know you have already heard a lot of times the word holistic, which means that it not only deals with energy, but it also deals with energy verification. So not only simulation, but also verification based on measurements. We also include health and comfort evaluation based on IEQ measurements and simulations, and a link with the financial market through risk assessment. So in a nutshell, it is based on a harmonized set of new sense standards so that we have good quality energy simulations. It is transparent so that all the energy systems and renovation solutions are treated the same way. And it brings together societal and building owner consideration, which is the holistic approach. So it is an advisory tool that could be used in different situations. So it could be used by building owners at the scale of a building, but also of building stocks, because it could help you to benchmark the performance of your whole building stock, for instance, for real estate companies. And it can stand alone or be used and uptaken in existing schemes. So into more details, what is at the heart of the EVC is an ALDREN rating scale for the energy performance at EU scale, at EU level. So you can see that it's not in absolute terms, it's in relative terms, so it's based on an ISO standards, but the scale, the absolute values behind this scale have been based on first a review of reports sent by member states to the Commission, to define in 2013 what would be the cost optimum level of renovation for their whole building stocks to reach deep renovation. And it has been adjusted through simulations in the project for different types of building, because ALDREN is focusing only on non-residential buildings, on hotels and offices. So this scale will have the same aspect in relative terms, but in absolute terms it will be different for hotels, offices in different climates in Europe. The main point is that the one value at the middle corresponds to this cost optimum value based on the reports from the member states. On the shape is not linear, which means that when you are on the right, when you have a low energy performance and you invest in renovation, you can reach easily a higher level. But if you're on the left, you already have a good level, then it's harder with the same investment to reach a better level of performance. And so the class A NZEB corresponds approximately to NZEB building. So how would that EVC would be uptaken by the market? First, we know that in some countries there is a lack of confidence, a lack of trust in the national EPCs. So maybe this scale or parts of the EVC would be uptaken to update these national EPCs. Another point would be that it would be used to, as I told you before, to benchmark stocks, for instance, of real estate companies. So if we have a lot of EVC that are produced, then it will be possible to better understand the performance of buildings in the European market, and with the link with financial evaluation. And also, since the Commission wanted to implement this tool, we hope that maybe the Commission would use part of what we have developed in the project.
Okay, thank you, Olivier. A third identified solution is try to focus on specific building typologies. And Lucas, there you have some information.
Yeah, thank you very much. You can proceed ahead with the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, the challenge is related specifically to residential building, and the reason why is into these key points. First of all, the role of residential building in terms of consumption, because this typology of buildings alone accounts for the 27% of the overall energy European consumption. And also in med area, this kind of market for residential buildings has two peculiarities, as I just mentioned before, that are the private property and the property fragmentation, that constitute a very relevant bottlenecks to the market uptake. And this is necessary and strategic to intervene, especially on these two bottlenecks. Please go ahead. And the results is of HAPPEN project. In terms of solution and methodology is concentrated in this slide, in which you can see the cost optimal evaluation through the application on optimal packages of solution, in which we have on a specific reference climate into a specific reference building. We have just implemented a very comprehensive abacus of renovation measure that included from envelope to HVAC system, and through the cost optimality methodology, we are able to evaluate starting from the reference building as it is, a cloud of dots in which we have implemented all the alternatives through a specific calculation, and the optimal area, optimal solution, able to reduce as much as possible the life cycle cost at 30 years versus the primary energy consumption. We are now implementing this methodology on 10 different pilots from 7 Med Euro countries. And few slides, please go ahead. On the first one, that is the pilot in Castellón de la Plana in Spain, in which we have modeled 2 different scenarios. The first one is related to the all-in-one solution, in which, starting from the building as it is, we have implemented a group of solution, optimized solution, able to reach as at least a deep retrofit level. And as an alternative approach, more tailored to the med area market, we have implemented also the step-by-step approach with the first step, and please go to the next slide, determining also a new cost optimal on a second step of intervention. And it's important to highlight that each step of this model is supported by a tailored financial solution. Please.
Okay, thank you. Next identified solution are the so-called building renovation passports. And Alexander, I think that's up to you to explain it.
Okay, first of all, a disclaimer that iBROAD did not come up with the building renovation passports. I think this is well known. Building renovation passports have been part of a broader dialogue since some time, and actually the project was part of that dialogue in the sense that organizations that participated in that broader dialogue came together to made this proposal. However, we are now happy. iBROAD started in 2017. In the meantime, there has been development in the EPBD, and the EPBD itself now includes reference to the building renovation passport as a potential solution. It also includes reference to step-by-step renovation, step-by-step deep renovation, which I think is very important, innovative in one sense approach. So to say a few words of what we believe the building renovation passport could be, what is our model, iBROAD model for a building renovation passport. It includes 2 major parts. One is the building renovation roadmap, which is a plan for a step-by-step renovation of a building. And this does not include just energy, because we know quite well that energy is very often not the primary reason for renovating a building, but we want that to be integrated as well. Plus a building logbook, and this would be again not just for energy and not just even for renovation, in the sense that it would have information about a lot of aspects about the building. If you want, it could be you could call it a poor man's BIM, or if you want a BIM for buildings of any class. At the very top level, you could say that it's much closer to the BIM logic. If we can go to the next slide. So if we look at a building, we will see that there is already a lot of information at the individual building level. So there is quite probably an existing energy performance certificate. There is information that can be gathered on site by a special energy audit, by a building professional, by the building owner or tenant themselves, by public authorities. And in the case of Flanders, there is a very good model for this. And in the very near future, if not already, there might be automated data from smart meters, monitoring systems, etc. So the building renovation passport, in our view, takes all this information, uses it to build a renovation roadmap on the one hand, and then includes all this information in the logbook, which is an inventory of building related information. It can have static information, but ideally it should also have information and functionalities that is dynamic. And it could link building owners to third parties. We have seen quite a few examples of this around Europe. There's actually quite a few initiatives, quite different in many cases. So, for example, in Germany, there is you will excuse me if I don't remember to pronounce well the German word, but the logic is precisely that we are talking about a renovation roadmap. On the other hand, in Flanders we have a model which is much closer to the logbook in terms of putting all the information together. And here we have to say that there is, of course, an infrastructure behind it, and this infrastructure includes, not least, an identification code for a building, which brings all the information together, which even this is not evident. I can say a few words later on additional to this, but one important point which was shown in the previous slide was that we are talking about a holistic renovation process, and we are also talking about the step-by-step renovation process. And these few words, I would say, bring together also a lot of the points that were raised here also by other projects. And I think we'll discuss more later on.
Thank you. Just wanted to add one thing. As you might know, there is the Article 19A in the EPBD, which, let's say, foresees that the European Commission must carry out a feasibility study for the inspection of standalone ventilation systems and for the building renovation passport. Next Monday, so June 24, they will be in Brussels in Centre Borchet. So a stakeholders meeting. If you are interested, you can still register. Go on the website epbd19a.eu, or you can contact me after the meeting. I can provide more information. Next possible solution which have been identified are integrated platforms, and that will be presented by Simona.
Yes, indeed. So we are here again talking about a holistic approach and a step-by-step renovation process. The way TripleA Reno interpreted this concept is by developing a platform. So here again, we know there are different stakeholders involved in a renovation scene, and also different steps that are quite different. So the idea is that we are aiming to deliver a platform that supports deep renovation process, but really dividing the steps into different, we call it levels. So the idea is to have 3 levels. So the design phase, the construction phase, and the in-use phase. So during the design phase, the idea of the TripleA Reno platform is to support homeowners, or as I said before, housing associations, or even tenants in this phase, to understand which is the most optimal solution for them. So we have a sort of carousel of concepts, of renovation concepts and renovation measures, from which the homeowner can opt in or can choose. And this is made through a very attractive visual platform that provides this sort of affordable, attractive solution. So here we have what we call the co-design app. So it's an app in which the homeowner, together with the designer or the engineer, what we call the mediator, can find out which is the best solution. So here, really, we want to start from the very beginning to involve the home owners or the occupants of the homes to understand which is the solution that is actually needed. So once, let's say, once the solution is selected in this co-design app, then the process can move to phase 2, so to level 2. And here is the construction phase. You see, during the construction phase, we also highlighted a sort of list of barriers or challenges. For instance, the fact that once a solution, a technology solution is selected, we might not know who is the most suitable company or the contractor that is able to actually develop the renovation. So here we are not thinking about e-marketplace per se, but we are thinking of connecting to a sort of database of quality inspector and of certified professionals that are actually able to deliver the work. And here we are connecting to a database or some databases that are already existing. Because of the nature of TripleA Reno itself, this is a like all the other projects, is a coordination and support action. So we really need to leverage on previous solutions and outcomes. And here we are indeed implementing methodologies on enhanced quality control from some related projects. For instance, quality check and specifically the Build Up Skill Advisory app. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So the Build Up Skill Advisory app, it's a big database actually of pictures and installation, the way they should be installed in a brief way. So the idea of TripleA Reno is to connect with this platform and providing a feedback of quality control to the professionals and installers that are using the service. So in a way, from one side, the installer has, a constant feedback if his work is, delivered in the right way, but also he can receive stars, badges in a sort of game, so that the users can connect with him in a sort of, high score or TripAdvisor of the renovation solutions. And then we move to phase 3, of course. So we are assuming that the construction phase went all well, and the user was able to follow up on the different steps. But now the user has this new car that drives really well, but he also needs to know how to drive it. So the idea here is to involve the occupants also during the real-time use of the new apartment or the new home, and to support them with visualization and dashboard to keep track of the consumption, and also to maintain not only, a good performance from the building side, but also a behavioral performance that is good on track. With this, also TripleA Reno aims to support or to derive a sort of voluntary certification scheme that is also in use. And with this, the idea of the cluster is indeed to try to use some of the previous solutions that are already developed, and to again try to deliver a holistic solution, not to duplicate what has been already done.
Okay. Thank you, Simona. So we have heard now 5 key solutions. Any questions or comment about what is presented, or do you see other key solutions? Yes.
Johan Zengül, CSTB. When I look on your slide, I see the design phase, I see the construction phase, I see the in-use phase. But for me, is missing the most important, which is the decision-taking phase. Because this is the trigger point. Because if I don't have the trigger point, the decisions that I do it, then I will not enter in the circle. And I like very much, I think, what in the morning until now, the word what touched me very much was what you said. It's about attractivity. And then I just wonder what in the decision phase we would put as keywords to make the thing attractive.
Yes, indeed. And what we consider a design phase is indeed from the decision-making point up until the actual decision, for instance, to the contracting phase, okay? And it's absolutely true. And that's the reason why with TripleA Reno, with the platform, we're not just trying to support the final end user in this, but we are actually involving a sort of umbrella associations, for instance, housing corporation and big groups that can actually take decisions on a higher level. We work, for instance, with municipalities, and we would like municipalities to use the tool, to use the platform as a decision-making tool to support their decisions. There are some very simple but specific elements with the TripleA Reno platform at a very early stage, just by defining which is your building typology, where your building is located in, to understand by inserting some of the predefined concepts and measures, which is going to be the total investment, which is going to be the, you know, the total savings, and which is going to be the return on investment. Very roughly, so we just want to give like a spanometric idea, but here again, it's a decision-making tool that we want to deliver.
Thank you, Simona. Other question or comment? Yes.
Yes, good morning. Céline Carré with Saint-Gobain. And sorry, I missed some of the earlier presentations. I'm interested in what you have found in the last bullet point on your slide here, is how you are working with other certification schemes. And you mentioned here levels, and which is also a big project at your level. Next presentation will be on this. Have you actually tried to look at wider impacts than energy in the use phase, according to the levels framework? Thanks.
Yes, it's very important that you mention levels, because the whole idea of having this cluster event, or one of the most important trigger, was indeed to think, okay, all these projects are aiming to deliver sort of voluntary certification scheme. So the TripleA, the ALDREN, the HAPPEN, iBROAD. But then we thought, is this really necessary? Can we maybe align towards something that is already existing, and to try to deliver a document or a sort of protocol or a schema to the European Commission that is a sort of European voluntary certification scheme? And so we thought about levels, of course, which is not certification schemes, as you know, but it's just a framework. So we try to understand how to read levels and to make it part of these voluntary certification schemes. So of course, at least for what concerns TripleA, we try to take into consideration aspects related to comfort, but also related to health and well-being for the users. And we already observed most of the parameters that are included in levels to take it this as part as our let's say monitoring protocol. So we know already when we are going to perform our monitoring, we have included these parameters in our schema. This next step is indeed to learn more about levels and try to organize with the other projects. And indeed, for instance, this afternoon we have a task force among all of us to understand how to make this unified schema possible among all the projects. So.
Okay, thank you. I think this discussion clearly highlights the need of coordination, communication. We have, I think, all pieces of a puzzle. If we bring it together, we can have a nice puzzle, but it's clearly quite challenging. So we have heard now a number of challenges, a number of solutions. Now we would like to move some more insights, results. And so first of all, I would like to hear from Olivier something more about common language for building actors.
Yes, I would split the presentation into two parts. The first part would be about common language within the ALDREN consortium, between the ALDREN partners, and the other point will be with external actors to the project. So concerning within the project, so a huge share of the work was to define a holistic approach, as said before, and to adjust it. So you can see the work plan of the project on the right, with tools that you have already heard about also from iBROAD before. So you have, it's a modular project, so you have 4 main tools, so 4 main modules. The first one was the energy rating scheme, labeling scheme, which I presented before. The second one is to how to verify the energy performance based on measurements. The third one is how to address health and well-being issues. And the fourth one was how to translate all this information into financial and economic indicators. So based on all these modules and all the information that is produced, we fill 2 tools. So the European voluntary certification on the top, and on the bottom we have also a building passport, which is also based on the Article 19 of the PBD. So the first one was how to set the scope of these energy and IQ evaluations. For instance, for energy, what does that mean to verify the energy performance? Should we try to explain where the gap comes between the real performance and the simulated performance based on which parameters for the simulations, and we had a lot of discussions about that. About IEQ performance, do you simulate it, do you measure it, which indicators do you take into account based on which existing schemes, so a lot of discussion about that as well. Then a huge discussion is how to translate all these energy and IEQ indicators into financial performance. Do you do qualitative assessments or do you do quantitative assessments? Because this financial performance is really depending on the local market, on the local context. So in the end, we came up with rather qualitative assessments, but there were huge discussions between different partners, especially since the person who is in charge of the financial task has not the same profile as us energy engineers. And the last one was how to define the interactions between these two tools, because once again we do policy support to the PBD as the other projects for the EVC and the passport. So in which situation are you going to use each tool, and especially since you have to produce all the information on field, you would like not to do the work twice. So the information that you will find in the EVC and the passport is the same information, but it will be more detailed in the passport, and they will not be used always in the same situation, because the EVC is rather a tool for benchmarking building stocks at the scale of EU of real estate companies, whereas the passport is rather to manage the daily operation of a building and the step-by-step renovation of this building. So then we develop our methodologies and we present them to external actors. So I will focus here only on real estate companies. We have good contacts with some of them, especially in France as well. The first thing they say is never talk in technical terms about energy and environment to financial actors. They will not understand you and they will kill you. So what they say is that you should rather talk their language, which is risk assessment. So it's not easy to define what is risk, especially since I'm not a specialist, but what is risk is trying to evaluate in the mid to the long term the changes in the attractiveness of the building, depending on evolutions in the local market, in the national and European regulations, and in this regulatory framework. So in risk, we consider all the risks related to the ALDREN topics, but we have other risks like information management that we are going to introduce, but which are not at the heart of the project. So this makes the link with new constraints from evolutions in the regulatory framework. In France, we have currently a context which is this decree, the French decree, which means that for all the tertiary non-residential sector, buildings will have to improve their performance by 40% in 2030 by comparison with 2010. And all the companies that do not comply with these objectives, their names will be put on blacklist. So in terms of image and brand value, it will have a huge impact on them. So this topic is really a huge topic today in France. And what they told us is that, well, it's interesting what you're developing, but it should be in line with our needs to put this decree into place. Then the priorities. All of us know that energy is not a priority, but rather well-being is a good priority that we can advocate for. There is a lack of knowledge concerning health issues in building and air quality, and these financial actors are not really aware about that, so we have to communicate more about this. And the last point is the deep renovation opportunities, which you can see with this graph, which means that if you only do a small renovation, you will have a small reduction in the energy management cost that you can that can impact on and slightly increase the rent of the building, but this will not bring a lot of money to these people. So what they would like to do, rather, if you do a deep renovation, you redo it for all the building services, because in this situation, then you will change the market category in which your building is. So you will have a higher quality building for all the services, and then you can see the red square on the right, which means that you will have a huge increase in the building value and the market value of your building.
Thank you, Olivier. Olivier referred to indoor environmental quality, well-being, health, and these I think are indeed important aspects as additional value when you think of deep renovation. And this aspect was also a particular issue of attention in the Happen project, and I think, Lucas, you want to say something more about that.
Yeah, talking about other benefits and the benefits expected from the Happen project, is essential to start from one important assumption that is typical for the southern of Europe. In the southern of Europe culture, the home is conceived as a stable and a solid investment, stable over the time. And since 2008, due to the global crisis, the economical value of this building dropped in many areas, and of course also the perceived values of retrofitted buildings is decreasing. Starting from this, the benefits that I want to highlight in these few minutes is on only one word: savings, declined in two different meanings. On technical point of view, when I'm referring to savings in terms of energy demand reduction, consumption reduction through the instruments that I've just presented, but also savings in terms of protection of family provisions, fostering the market uptake and the creation of a flexible market into med areas. And comparing with, if we compare these two expected benefits from the project with some interesting outputs that are coming out from a living lab session that we are implementing at local level in each of 10 pilot sites, it's very interesting to highlight these 5 key points, because these 5 key points came out from the general public, from the end user, from the owners, from the professionals engaged at the local level. And it's very interesting to collect them in order to trigger some strategic action in order to foster into practice the takeoff of the market. First of all, the reduction of energy bills, of course. The investment on retrofitting, as I mentioned before, as to keep its value over the time, but also the flexibility of the investment plan over the time has to be guaranteed in order to cope with the real life conditions. And also the people wants to improve the overall quality of the building in order to increase the indoor air quality, but also we have noticed that is also an awareness raising about the environment, and some feedback are very interesting about the spillovers, positive spillovers in terms of environment and on the holistic impacts. And per each of these 5 key points, we are now trying to fine-tune and to optimize the activity and the output of the project in order to answer specifically at each of them. And okay.
Thank you. In terms of business models, I think we should also focus more, or let's say, particular to the user. And I think, Simona, you want to say something more about user-centered business models.
Yes, indeed. So as you understood, TripleA Reno really focuses on users. But for us, users are not just homeowners, so the final users. So this is like a fundamental mind shift that we want to stress. We work a lot with a group of anthropologists in our team, and with them we define this concept of people-centered approach. So it's the people involved in the renovation process. It's not just users. So the people are from the designer, of course. They are the architects. They are the engineers. They are the members of the housing corporations. They are municipalities, people working in municipalities. So the idea for our business model is that if we don't talk to these people, if we don't understand what they actually need to overcome these barriers in the uptake of deep renovation practices, our work is going to be wasted. Technology is there. It's just the way we sell the technology to people, how we convince people that it is good for them. This is attractive, that's affordable, and is accepted. That's the whole idea. That's the core idea of our business model. So the way we are working with that is, so we are we want to develop a gamified platform. So in this, our anthropologists are working really tightly with the ICT developers of the platform to understand which are the main features that are important, very important, to include for the people that are going to use the platform itself. So what we are doing, we organize what we call the TripleA Reno Roadshow. And you can go to the next slide. So the idea is that by leveraging from the support of our umbrella associations, for instance, Architect Council of Europe, Housing Europe, RIVA, and UAPI, so the union of the International Union of Property Owners, and also supported by CLE, representing municipalities, we are organizing different events that are awareness-raising events. So for each of these workshops, for instance, we are talking to the members of these organizations, and we are asking them to recollect what we call a user journey. So what's the journey for you or for your member to eventually use or to promote this platform? Why do you think your members or the people you are representing would use this tool? For which purposes? And by having this vision in mind, we are recollecting the pieces of the puzzle to put together the different functionalities of our platform.
Thank you. Dragomir, I think when we discussed the challenges, you highlighted the lack of qualified workers. So I think capacity building is probably an important issue, and I think you want to say something more about that.
Yes, thank you. And indeed, it's not only about workers. And I would basically, not surprisingly, would have to repeat what my colleague said before. Actually, the thing here is to raise the awareness of the benefits of deep energy retrofit. Of course, not only in energetic and financial aspect, but about comfort, well-being, health conditions. That's the first thing. And then there is the capacity to deliver services that feed on the benefits for each stakeholder group involved in the value chain of the construction industry. So this capacity is something that we try to create within our networks of training centers, training and consultation centers that we established under the projects Train to NZEB and Fit to NZEB. These are actually 11 training centers in 9 European countries. And the first thing that we realized is that we first of all have to build capacity in ourselves. The first thing is to forget the local differences and try to see the overall picture, try to engage in systematic thinking and find the whole components of the system, escaping from the little barriers that we face in our everyday work. And then the next very challenging effort is to skill up, to build capacity within trainers, educators, teachers at all levels. These are actually the figures, the stakeholders that would provide sustainability of the action. But it is very, very hard to challenge a trainer in his or her own field of expertise. This is something that we really have to pay attention to. We've been successful in training more than 500 trainers around these 9 European countries, and it's been a tough journey, long journey. I do hope that we will reap the benefits several years from now, but I do appreciate it as the biggest challenge we had. And then we are moving towards the whole value chain of the construction sector. I won't dwell on it. You all know about that. But I would like to point your attention to some unusual aspects. And these are the influencers in the decision-making process, the people that are able to make the retrofit process attractive, really. And think about, for example, the NGOs. Do you think that awareness levels about the benefits of building renovation and the cost of building renovation of environmental NGOs is sufficient? This is not our experience, proven by numbers of trainings that we have delivered and numbers of encounters that we've had with representatives of the civil society. A very important group. But then think about the media. How many workshops do you think that we organize for the media in our training and consultation centers? Not a single one, although we had a specific project, and these were free trainings targeted to the media. The interest towards the topic is very, very low. We are not high up in the public and I would say even in the political agenda, despite the declarations that we all have at higher governance levels. So actually this is our first task in our capacity building campaign, to bring the topic high up on the public agenda, to put it on the table, to have it in our daily routine conversations, at dinner with friends. So this is the things that we really have to build on. And for this, we have to stand up and talk. And I would like to conclude with that. I've been happy to work with many dedicated partners that were brave enough to stand up and talk to people from different backgrounds with different interests, and succeeded in attracting more than 1,000 people to go through the training in this training center. So this is the first good step. We need to speed up on that process.
Thank you, Dragomir. I think that probably all of us in the room know more or less what should be done. I assume several of us are homeowners and that we do what should be done. But of course there are millions of other homeowners. What are they thinking? What are they doing? And I think, Alexander, you have there some interesting information about the feedback of the homeowners.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to comment on two parts in two ways. One is what we found out at the start of the project when we looked at the countries where we would be doing our pilot testing, so Portugal, Poland and Bulgaria. And we did there a professional survey. We found some interesting information, some interesting diversions between the countries as well. So, for example, it's the logic that people want a plan in order to renovate. It sounds reasonable, and actually people seem to realize this. They believe that it's essential to have a plan to renovate over time. Otherwise, they might have problems. On the other hand, the EPCs, which are now quite old, the people know about them, but there are very different trust levels between the countries in this. And the starting point then to use the EPC for further to integrate it, for example, in a building renovation passport, and to use it for renovation. This depends very much on the country. In Poland, we found that most building owners plan to finance the renovation with their own savings. I think this is a very interesting finding. Of course, it's not in all countries, but it means that people, even beyond Mediterranean countries, think of houses as an asset, as something which for them is a place, let's say an artifact of a value for their family, for themselves. In Poland, we also found that people are interested in having a building renovation passport, but they are not willing to pay. A little bit like saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. But so on the one hand, they recognize the value, and on the other hand, they are not willing to pay themselves for it. So we will find, and I think that the anthropologists in TripleA Reno would confirm this, that people don't always speak rationally, and there is a Nobel Prize in economics that was given precisely for this finding. In Portugal, again, we found something which is not unusual at all in practice, is that people are more concerned about having a warm and comfortable home than saving energy. Again, that in practice people want are thinking of other things before energy, even though energy might be part of that as well. So just a very brief look at what we actually delivered in our project. That at this stage we have our prototype building passport, which is what we call the iBROAD plan plus the iBROAD log. So the renovation roadmap, the plan, plus the logbook, which is the inventory of information, and it's dynamic in sense of updating it as things go along. And after testing this in practice, we now have the first results. We will complete this during the summer in, again, Bulgaria, Poland, and Portugal. We have confirmed that this is considered useful, informative. We've had more than 60% positive responses, and let's not forget that we are talking about a prototype, so a lot of things done manually and not so easy. We've trained auditors to use it, and we've also trained them to bring in volunteer owners to get the information. We found that it brought motivation to renovate. We got a lot of feedback on the layout. Of course, things can be improved. The logbook was considered the most complex part. The roadmap much more intuitive. The logbook, of course, is much more complex by definition. It includes a lot more information. We got quite a few suggestions for improvements. One interesting point here, which we had not included, but it seems that it's very important, is to include the payback time for each of the measures. So in the step-by-step, see, okay, what does it cost? When should we expect to have a payback time? Which is a little bit sensitive in the sense that it's not always evident that you indeed will get back your money from some of those measures.
Okay. Thank you for providing these insights results. Any questions or comments?
Fernando Sicchos from the European Builders Confederation. Just a comment to you, Dragomir, because I don't know if you're aware, but there is a big initiative that just started last January on skills, which is called Construction Blueprint. Maybe you heard about the blueprint projects that have been set up by the European Commission. And here for the construction industry, starting in last January, and we as a representative of construction SMEs and craftsmen, the organization FIEC, representing SMEs and large contractors, and also the trade unions, are part of this project, which is a massive 4 years effort, creating, how can I say, a system, a sustainable system of communication between VET providers, VET representatives, with construction employers and trade unions. And for 4 years, and we are going to find a system that is going to be linked to the build-up skills for the part on energy efficiency, because there are 4 thematics: energy efficiency, circular economy, digitalization, and health and safety. So, I mean, what you're mentioning now, that we're lacking people, lacking quality people, we're lacking efforts on the communication side of, let's say, generally speaking, about the construction industry. A major initiative that just started now, so have a look at it. It's Construction Blueprint for Skills, and it's covering, if I'm not mistaken, 16 to 18 countries. So it's going to be a broad effort in order to, I won't dare to say harmonize somehow how we collaborate in between VET and construction representatives, but at least try to find a common ground and find a systematic approach in order to close the gap, the mismatch between what VET providers provide and what we need on the employers and trade union side.
Thank you very much. It's a valuable information, I guess, for many of us that are involved in build-up skills and construction skills project. And yes, indeed, we started with this idea, the build-up skills initiative, back in 2011. And the first thing that we did is to try to match the demand from the construction industry for the skills of the workers and skilled professionals in the later stages. And we did that analysis in 2012, 2013, and I'm really happy that at the end of the day it's bringing a little bit late, but still important results, because it's, you know, just about time to something like this to happen. But one thing I would like to add as a potential outcome for this initiative, and this is the large-scale introduction of certification of skills and knowledge of the blue-collar workers. It is something that organization like FIEC has to take the initiative in, but the skills passport is a thing that has to come into play and has enormous potential to improve the recognition, but also the demand for skilled workers. It can enter into the procurement procedures at national, especially at local level, things that are really crucial for improving the situation.
Yes,
Yes, this is a very interesting point what you just raised about build-up skills, about certification, about communication. I just wonder on what? Which skills? So, what we are talking about? We are talking about regional level, we are talking about national level, we are talking about European level. So when you say you want to have like a skill passport, I would like it very much. It means that, for example, somebody who is trained or certified on something, like an expert on, I don't know, on energy savings. So once he is trained, he can work all over Europe. But we are far from it. For example, now we have in Europe, we have 34 national certification schemes. So if I live in Strasbourg, I cannot work in Kiel, just over the Rhine, because it is in Germany, and then I am trained for France, I am certified for France, I cannot work there. So maybe this is a basic problem, that we should have something common, where to be trained of. Before we talked about levels. Levels, again, it's a framework. So it means that then it's the worst thing would be if levels is translated to 34 or 40 national health and well-being indicators. Then again, we will have a big problem. We will have never something where we can be trained, where we can have a common certification of build-up skills, and where we can train people on a common basis on this. And this, I think, is also a very big topic to be addressed, to come out with something which is common all over Europe.
Any reaction on this?
Can I react on this? I think I'm going to cover also part of your interest. What you're saying, it's extremely important, and indeed we are trying to take care of this also at the European level. There is a new project that is starting in September, which is EUSEW, and indeed the idea is to foster user-centered certification schemes, but absorbing the informations and the efforts that already have been developed, not to duplicate efforts. So we have different partners from France, from Spain, from Italy, and we know there are so many different certification schemes. The idea would be to homogenize this and to make it directed to the users. At the same time, we cannot just think of having tools that are working at a European level, but we need to work at the local scale. When it comes to training people, we really need to connect them to the local utilities and to the local manufacturers.
Okay. I see you don't agree.
Yeah. I see.
Can you take the micro? Yeah.
When I see what today is the most used, when I talk about building certification, when I see what is the most used tool in Europe, when I talk about building design, what is it? Is it American software which is called Energy Plus? And that's a pity. So today, the cost optimum calculations which has to be done by each European member state, very often the basis is Energy Plus, and then they say to make the cost optimum calculation, and then they adapt it to local conditions. That's the point. I think if you want to go in this direction, it's okay for me, no problem.
Okay, so there is area for more discussion. Yeah, please. Yeah. No. Anybody else who would like to comment, raise a question, react? We are close to the end. Alexander?
A very brief comment, which I think is in the direction that Johan also pointed out. Most of renovation incentive at the moment in Greece comes from Airbnb. And Airbnb does not have any kind of certification which is in any way related to energy efficiency, etc. So we see a lot of wasted money at the moment, and the worst is that it's not going to be able to renovate again those same buildings. So their awareness, of course, is critical, but indeed, to be clear, things are changing very, very fast. So it's not just a matter of agreeing between us, but also looking at the market, how it moves.
I think, Dragomir, you wanted to react also.
Yes, just a sentence on that, because mutual recognition is, it is called around the build-up skills circles has been a topic since it started, since 2011. And you're absolutely right. It's a matter of a very, very broad conversation with so many different aspects coming into play. And we haven't been able for more than 10 years to find a solution that suits all parties. But I would like to a little bit develop on what Alexander says. And I've mentioned that before. One of the reasons for that is insufficient market demand. So if we have a ripe market, so a market when innovation has been uptaken and has been coming into play, into a matter of norms, I believe that we will have the motivation to create a common vision. And I see a good sign in the blueprint initiative that FIEC is developing right now. So this is a sign that there is a recognition of the need for that kind of common appreciation of skills needed to deliver quality buildings. I am even not talking about this, about proving quality. And yeah, I really appreciate it, and I see good potential. I see light in the end of the tunnel in this initiative, so let's take it optimistically.
Okay, I think we're also arriving at the end of the tunnel of this session. So I hope it was a useful session for all of you. I'd like to thank you for your participation. I also like to thank ACE Architectural Council for Europe, as well as the 5 projects to hold this session. And I also would like to thank Built Up for registering this session. So thank you very much. Enjoy the coffee break, and see you later. Thank you.